especially since 9/11, it's become very important to understand that this process of two sides working behind the scenes, so to speak, is a process that unfortunately is going to happen until this whole operation of shifting us is completed. And of course, that because of that, the actual concept of the change will happen very suddenly, and that's why we have to be prepared and understand that when it happens, it's going to happen rapidly. Just like 9/11 went bang, it was there, and everything else happened quickly afterwards. So,
do you know if this first contact would happen during an Earth change event?
Well, they would like to keep it from them. They are working very hard with the groups of Elohim that are in charge of Mother Earth's Earth changes to maintain as minimal a process of rapid change as possible. But if contact had to happen that way, they would do it, of course, because what the Ascended Masters finally got back to them from what they were, because they're mainly acting as the intermediaries between the planetary hierarchies and the Federation, Galactic Federation, that is. Then if that particular scenario suddenly becomes the basic primary one, then they will go with that. But if it becomes something else, like the one that we're working on at the present time, that then is how they'll do it, because they would prefer there to be massive governmental changes, the formal announcements.
They prefer that to happen first?
Right, because it makes it much easier, because then they'll have formal announcements that A, they exist, B, they're benevolent, and C, they're here.
Now, how do you feel these announcements will happen?
Well, the initial concept of how they were supposed to happen, from what they told me, was it was just going to happen. There was going to be blink, there was going to be this massive taking over of the media, and suddenly there would be this announcements both on a physical basis, in other words, radio, TV, etc., and on a telepathic basis, in other words, telepathy, so that anybody who needed to know would see it either and feel it in their heads, or else they would see it on either a TV or would hear the words on a radio.
So people in third world countries would get the announcement also? Right.
It has to be worldwide, because the whole procedure is meant to be a worldwide operation. It's not just here or in parts of Europe or in parts of Asia. It has to be all parts of Latin America, all parts of Africa, all parts of Asia, even Australia, even some groups that are living up in the North Polar regions, northern Greenland, etc. Every group has to understand and know what's happening and be prepared for it. And so they would prefer that people on Earth found out about it before they actually had to do it, because what happens with that then is people understand it's happening. People are not scared because the government and other authoritative sources have told them that these beings exist, and B, they're benevolent, and C, they're coming to help. So the process then becomes a lot easier. It lowers a lot of the basic panic potential. And that's one of the big worries that the Federation has found out about with their looking around on this planet and society, is the whole massive problem of panic. People have become so indoctrinated and inundated with information saying that aliens or ETs are evil, that they're afraid that when people hear about this, what will happen is a general panic. And they don't want or prefer to minimize the general concepts of a panic, which could take on all kinds of crazy stuff. And they know that humans, when they get into panic, do all kinds of weird things. So
that's true.
They would like to minimize that basic potential. If they can do that this way, they will do it. If they have to do it another way, they're already working on different kinds of what they call a series of broadcasts, so that people would, if they don't get the governmental thing, if they have to go down before that, they would then use a series of broadcasts, probably about 2 or 3, to allow people to understand who they are, and they would probably do displays in certain areas with the broadcast, so that
Now, are you talking about telepathic ones? Or?
Right. This broadcast would be the same concept. They would be on radio and TV, in other words, the physical, and they would also be telepathic. That's absolutely correct.
Okay, so they would take over the satellites and
everything
like that. Okay. And they feel this will not cause panic?
They feel that if they do it in a loving way, what they want to do is put down a wave around the planet when they start doing this, of love and an overwhelming feeling of joy. And they would like to use this to overwhelm the basic mental concept that people have about this dark ET concept.
Right. That's something that I find myself dealing with a lot, not only in my family, but with other people who, when I talk about the extraterrestrials, benevolent ones, a lot of people do believe that they are the fallen angels. I've heard that. I've heard that a lot in the last few years,
right?
Especially, and demonic. And how do you get past that when you hear that? Or what do you tell people?
Well, first I get upset with it myself internally, and then I know that my process is, in other words, my mission here is to get people over that. So I start explaining to people who they are and what they are, and try to explain to people scientifically who they are and what they are and where they're coming from. And you have to understand that these are civilizations that aren't just a few decades ahead of us or a few centuries ahead of us or a few millennia ahead of us. These are civilizations that are millions of years ahead of us.
Yes.
And what's been found out is when you get an advanced civilization that is that old, the tendency of it to be benevolent is increased to levels that are almost infinite in the percentages, the probabilities. 99.9 to an unbelievable number percent. So when you understand that, and you also understand the nature that these beings have been surrounding us and helping us for centuries and millennia as well, then you begin to see the whole process of how they have waited patiently for the right moment for a long, long time. And then you understand the way they've operated. A lot of them have come as messengers or as like angels because they have really associated themselves for a long, long time with the spiritual hierarchy, not only of this galaxy, but of this planet and this solar system. So as a result, they have a very long relationship with them that allows people to understand that they are a part of that whole process, just as we are as well, because when we become fully conscious physical angels, we are a part of that whole system. We're just kind of in an amnesia, limited conscious state where we've been disconnected from full understandings of that whole process, that whole information, and because of that, we're kind of like people running around in the dark, and we don't know or understand what the dark is, or if we see something that looks like a light in the dark, we don't understand whether to run towards it or to ignore it or to fear it. Those are the three basic reactions. So we have to understand that that light in the dark is this benevolent energy from heaven as well as from its physical components, which is the Galactic Federation beings, and that they are here for this whole process of bringing about this change. And everybody on this planet, regardless of who they are, is talking about this great shift on our planet and the concept of peace, the concept of a new reality. So what we have to look at is, if we were creating a vast new reality and we are expanding our consciousness to its highest potential levels, then it's quite natural to say that heaven will have a divine intervention to help us in this whole shift, and that this shift in divine intervention will be not only physical, it'll be spiritual. And so we have to understand that the physical aspect is the Galactic Federation and the Ascended Masters when they manifest, and it's also spiritual, being heaven directing this whole process. So as we understand that and we begin to look at it, and of course you can go through all kinds of biblical evidence which shows that there has been a long history of beings who look like us working very closely with quote-unquote angels and God, and working toward creating the divine plan on this planet, creating the good on this planet. And so we have to then understand totally that this is part of a natural process. It's not odd. It's not a massive intervention. It's not of a dark kind, in other words, an invasion. It's actually an intervention for us, just as you talk about being an intervention in people when they have drug addictions and they're moving out of it or whatever, you have an intervention, and that's basically what they're part of this whole process of moving us away from our dark manipulation, which is equivalent to almost any kind of similar type of addiction, to moving toward the light and understanding and becoming one with the energies of heaven, which is what a fully conscious being is capable of easily. So that is what we understand. So that's how I basically explain all of that in a nutshell, without going to all the different things. I've done lectures on this whole
subject. And that makes sense too. Now you mentioned that the announcements and the government changes must happen first.
Right, that's the preferred